What happens when two of television's most beloved morning show hosts clash in a way that nobody saw coming? The answer lies in what started as a routine interview that quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this heated exchange. The Kelly Clarkson Show had been riding high on its reputation for creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere where celebrities could share their most personal stories. Kelly's genuine curiosity and empathetic interviewing style had made her show a favorite destination for stars looking to connect with audiences on a deeper level. So when Jenna Bush Hager, co-host of the Today Show's Fourth Hour, was booked as a guest to promote her latest book about resilience and family bonds, everyone expected another heartwarming conversation filled with laughter and meaningful moments. The studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as crew members made final adjustments to lighting and cameras. Jenna arrived looking polished and professional in a navy blue blazer, her signature warm smile greeting everyone she encountered. She had done hundreds of interviews over the years, and this felt like just another friendly chat between two women who understood the pressures and privileges of working in television. Kelly, fresh from her opening monologue where she had charmed the audience with stories about her kids' latest antics, settled into her interview chair with her characteristic enthusiasm. "I'm so excited to have you here today," Kelly began, her voice carrying that genuine warmth that had endeared her to millions of viewers. "Your new book really resonated with me, especially the parts about finding strength in unexpected places. But I have to ask, and I hope this doesn't sound too forward, but how do you balance being authentic on television when you come from such a prominent political family? I mean, there must be times when you want to speak your mind but feel like you can't because of who your father and grandfather were." The question hung in the air for just a moment longer than usual. Jenna's smile flickered almost imperceptibly, a subtle shift that only the most observant viewers might have caught. She had fielded similar questions countless times over her career, but something about Kelly's phrasing, or perhaps the timing, seemed to strike a different chord. "You know, Kelly, I think that's actually a misconception that a lot of people have about my family," Jenna replied, her voice maintaining its professional cadence but carrying a slight edge that hadn't been there moments before. "Been encouraged to think for ourselves and speak our minds. My father raised us to be independent thinkers, not political puppets." Kelly sensed the subtle shift in energy but pressed forward, perhaps misreading Jenna's response as an invitation to dig deeper. "But surely there have been times when you've disagreed with family positions or felt constrained by expectations. I mean, when your father was president, you were young adults, making your own mistakes and finding your own voices. That must have been incredibly difficult, having every stumble scrutinized through a political lens." "I think you might be conflating personal growth with political constraint," Jenna said, her posture straightening slightly. "Yes, we made mistakes, but they were our mistakes to make and learn from. The idea that we were somehow politically muzzled or couldn't be authentic because of our last name is just not accurate. If anything, our family has always valued honest conversation and respectful disagreement." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop a few degrees as crew members exchanged glances. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected the interview to take. Kelly, perhaps realizing she had touched a nerve, attempted to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Of course, I didn't mean to imply anything negative about your family. I think what I'm really curious about is how you've managed to carve out your own identity in such a public way. Your work on Today shows such authenticity and vulnerability." But Jenna wasn't ready to let the previous comment slide. "Kelly, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but I think there's an underlying assumption in your questions that I find troubling. You seem to be suggesting that authenticity and political heritage are somehow mutually exclusive, or that growing up in a political family automatically makes someone less genuine or more calculated in their public persona." The audience, which had started the segment with their usual enthusiastic energy, began to sense the growing tension. Conversations that had started as friendly exchanges between two successful women in media were transforming into something much more charged. Kelly's famous ability to put guests at ease was being tested in a way she rarely experienced, and Jenna's usual diplomatic grace was giving way to something more protective and assertive. "That's not what I meant at all," Kelly said, her voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "I'm just trying to understand the unique challenges you've faced. I think our viewers would be interested in hearing about how you've navigated those waters, because it's such a unique experience that most people can't relate to." "But that's exactly the problem," Jenna shot back, her voice rising just enough to signal that this conversation was moving beyond the realm of friendly television banter. "You're treating my family background like it's some kind of burden or obstacle I've had to overcome, rather than a source of strength and values that shaped who I am. Would you ask the daughter of a teacher how she overcame the limitations of growing up in an educational household?" The comparison to a teacher's daughter seemed to catch Kelly off guard, and for the first time in the interview, she appeared genuinely flustered. The studio audience, which had been murmuring quietly during the exchange, fell into an uncomfortable silence as they watched two of their favorite television personalities square off in real time. Kelly's producer, watching from behind the cameras, made subtle hand gestures trying to signal for a commercial break, but Kelly was too focused on the conversation to notice. "Jenna, I think you're misunderstanding my intent," Kelly said, her voice carrying a hint of frustration that her viewers rarely heard. "I'm not trying to diminish your family or suggest that your background is a burden. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about the realities of growing up in the public eye under such intense scrutiny. Surely you can acknowledge that your experience was different from most people's." "Of course my experience was different," Jenna replied, her own frustration now clearly visible. "But different doesn't mean damaged or inauthentic, which seems to be what you're implying. You keep using words like constraints and limitations and asking how I overcame my family background. As if being a Bush is some kind of psychological obstacle I needed therapy to work through." Kelly leaned forward in her chair, host instincts warring with her growing annoyance at what she perceived as Jenna's defensive overreaction. "I never said anything about therapy or psychological obstacles. I'm simply acknowledging that growing up as the daughter of a president comes with unique challenges that most people don't face. I think our viewers would appreciate hearing about how you've handled those challenges with such grace." "But that's exactly what I'm talking about," Jenna said, her voice rising with passion. "You keep framing everything as a challenge or an obstacle. Why can't it just be my life? Why does every conversation about my family have to focus on how difficult it must have been rather than how privileged and grateful I am for the values and opportunities they provided me?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators continued filming, but several crew members had stopped their usual behind-the-scenes activities to watch the unfolding drama. Kelly's signature warmth was being replaced by something sharper and more combative, as she felt her interviewing skills being questioned on her own show. "Because privilege doesn't exist in a vacuum," Jenna Kelly said, her voice taking on an edge that surprised everyone, including herself. "And I think it's a little naive to pretend that your family's political legacy hasn't opened doors for you that might not have been available to other people. I'm not trying to diminish your accomplishments, but let's be honest about the advantages. You've had words hung in the air like a challenge," and Jenna's face went through a series of micro-expressions that telegraphed her internal struggle between maintaining her professional composure and responding to what she clearly perceived as a personal attack. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that anyone who knew her well would have recognized as a warning sign. "I think we need to acknowledge the reality of nepotism in media," Kelly continued, apparently not recognizing the warning signs. "Your position at NBC, your book deals, your speaking engagements, they're all connected to your last name. That doesn't make you less talented or hardworking, but it does make your path different from someone who had to build their career from scratch." The studio audience gasped collectively, a sound that would later become one of the most replayed moments in daytime television history. Jenna's face went through a rapid transformation from shock to hurt to something approaching fury. "Are you seriously suggesting that I don't deserve my career? That everything I've accomplished is just because of my name? That's not what I said," Kelly replied, but her voice lacked conviction. She was beginning to realize that she had crossed a line, but her own pride was preventing her from backing down. "I'm saying that your opportunities have been different, and I think acknowledging that reality is important for having an honest conversation about privilege and access in our industry." "Honest conversation," Jenna repeated, her voice now trembling with barely controlled anger. "You invited me here to talk about my book about resilience and family bonds, And instead, you've spent the entire interview trying to tear down my family and question whether I've earned anything in my life. How is that honest? How is that fair?" Kelly's producer was now frantically signaling for a commercial break. But the confrontation had taken on a momentum of its own. Both women were operating on pure adrenaline and wounded pride, their professional personas stripped away to reveal the raw human emotions beneath. "I never tried to tear down your family," Kelly protested. "I asked legitimate questions about the unique aspects of your upbringing and career path. If you can't handle those questions without getting defensive, maybe you're not as comfortable with your privilege as you claim to be." The accusation hit its target with devastating accuracy. Jenna's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like betrayal. "I'm getting defensive because you're sitting here questioning my integrity and my qualifications on national television under the guise of having an honest conversation. You're hiding behind journalistic curiosity to make personal attacks. Personal attacks." Kelly's voice rose to match Jenna's intensity. "I'm trying to have a real conversation about real issues instead of just letting you promote your book with softball questions. I thought you were someone who could handle substantive dialogue, but apparently you just want to be treated with kid gloves because of who your father is." The final sentence landed like a physical blow. Jenna's face went completely still, her professional mask finally slipping entirely. "Because of who my father is," she repeated slowly, her voice deadly quiet. The silence that followed Kelly's last comment was deafening. Even the studio audience seemed to be holding their breath as they watched Jenna process what had just been said to her. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression. As emotions played across her face like storm clouds gathering before a hurricane, when she finally spoke, her voice was so controlled it was almost whisper quiet. But every word carried the weight of years of accumulated frustration. "What, Kelly? I came here today thinking I was going to have a conversation with someone I respected. Someone I thought understood what it meant to work hard in this industry, regardless of where you started. But instead, you've spent this entire interview trying to diminish everything I've accomplished by reducing it to nothing more than family connections and unearned privilege." Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but Jenna held up a hand to stop her, her composure cracking just enough to let the real emotion show through. "No, let me finish. You want to talk about privilege? Let's talk about it honestly. Yes, I had opportunities that other people didn't have. Yes, my name opened doors. But do you know what else came with that name? Death threats against my family. Secret Service protection that meant I couldn't have a normal childhood or college experience. Every mistake I made becoming front page. News, every relationship scrutinized. Every career choice questioned." The studio was completely silent now except for Gina's voice, which was gaining strength and intensity with each word. "You think my path was easier? You think I just walked into NBC and they handed me a job because of my last name? I worked weekends and holidays. I covered stories in war zones. I interviewed grieving families and held crying children. I earned my place in this industry the same way you did, through hard work and dedication, but I had to do it while carrying the weight of public expectations and political baggage that you'll never understand." Kelly's face had gone pale as she realized how badly she had misjudged both the situation and her guest. "Jenna, I never meant to suggest that you haven't worked hard. I think there's been a misunderstanding here." "A misunderstanding?" Jenna's voice cracked with disbelief. "You questioned my authenticity, my qualifications, and my integrity on national television. And you want to call it a misunderstanding? You accused me of expecting special treatment because of who my father is. How exactly am I supposed to understand that?" The producer was now making increasingly desperate gestures from behind the cameras, but both women were too locked in their confrontation to notice. Kelly, perhaps realizing that she needed to try to salvage something from this disaster, attempted to regain control of the interview. "I think we both got a little heated here, and maybe we should take a step back and reset this conversation. We're both professionals, and I'm sure we can find a way to have a productive discussion about your book." But Jenna was already shaking. Her head, her decision clearly made. "No, Kelly, we can't just reset this conversation like it never happened. You don't get to attack someone's character and then suggest we move on when you realize you've gone too far. This isn't about getting heated or having different perspectives. This is about basic respect, and you've shown me today that you don't have any for me or my family." "That's not true," Kelly protested, her own composure finally starting to crack. "Under the pressure, I have tremendous respect for your family's service to this country. I was trying to ask thoughtful questions about complex issues, not attack anyone's character." "Thoughtful questions?" Jenna repeated, standing up from her chair for the first time during the interview. The movement sent a visible ripple of tension through the studio, as everyone realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Call questioning whether I've earned my career thoughtful. You call suggesting that I expect special treatment because of my father thoughtful. Those aren't thoughtful questions, Kelly. Those are accusations wrapped in the language of journalism." Kelly also stood, perhaps instinctively matching Jenna's body language. But her voice had lost all of its earlier confidence. "I was trying to have an honest conversation about privilege and opportunity in our industry. These are important topics that deserve discussion." "Then have that conversation with someone else," Jenna said firmly, reaching for her purse and the small stack of books she had brought to give away during the segment. "Because I won't sit here and let you use me as your example of unearned privilege or nepotism. Or whatever point you're trying to make about the unfairness of the media industry." The audience watched in stunned silence as Jenna gathered her belongings with swift, efficient movements. Kelly, finally grasping the full magnitude of what was happening, made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Jenna, please don't leave. I think we can work through this misunderstanding. Let's take a commercial break and talk about this off camera." Jenna paused in her gathering of belongings and looked directly at Kelly with an expression that managed to be both disappointed and resolved. "The cameras aren't the problem here, Kelly. The problem is that you thought it was acceptable to invite someone onto your show and then spend the entire time questioning their right to exist in the same professional space as you. The problem is that you confuse being provocative with being insightful, and you forgot that there's a real person sitting across from you with real feelings and real accomplishments that have nothing to do with her last name." With that, Jenna straightened her jacket one final time and walked toward the studio exit. The cameras followed her movement as she paused at the edge of the set and turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, Kelly, I hope you figure out the difference between asking hard questions and being cruel. Your audience deserves better than what they witnessed here today." The studio doors closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow seemed to echo through the cavernous space. Kelly stood alone on her set, surrounded by her crew and audience, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disappointment. The silence stretched on until someone finally called for a commercial break, but the damage had already been done. What started as a routine book promotion had become a masterclass in how quickly professional relationships can deteriorate when ego and misunderstanding collide. The raw emotion and genuine conflict between two accomplished women had created a moment of television that would be dissected and analyzed for years to come. So, what do you think really caused this explosive confrontation? Was Kelly's line of questioning legitimate journalism, or did she cross a line into personal attack? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.